Hello everyone. You're welcome to this week's Tech Tuesdays webinar on accelerated ROI using pattern-based approach, IICS. I'm Vrinda, your host for today's webinar. We have Deepak Balakrishnan joining us today, who is a senior principal consultant with Informatica Professional Services. He's a journey lead for cloud data warehouse in APJ. He is in information technology industry for over 20 years and has spent the last 15 years with Informatica product suite, helping various customers achieve quick ROI by helping them implement a repeatable approach using Informatica iPaaS. This has helped them to reap the benefits of the platform proficiently and consistently. Before we start this webinar, here are some housekeeping tips. The duration of this webinar is for 1 hour, including the 15 minutes Q&A. You can post your queries in the Q&A box. Dial-in participants are muted for the entire session. The session is being recorded and will be available in the Informatica Support YouTube channel and the Success Portal. You'll be able to download the slide deck from Success Portal. Please feel free to put in your feedbacks and suggestions for the session in the post-webinar survey. The Tech Tuesdays webinars are hosted within the Success Portal. The Informatica Success Portal is a micro-learning platform that offers free and unlimited learning to all registered users. This feature-rich platform was launched to help you learn and use Informatica products better. A newly launched learning path on IICS Primer for Power Center developers has been curated to address all your Power Center to IICS requirements. Here are a few important links that you can go over later that will help you in your product adoption journey with Informatica. Over to you, Deepak. Thank you.
Thanks, Brenda, for your introduction. Hi, folks. Today, we'll look into the business drivers and challenges faced by majority of organizations. After that, we'll look into the no-code, low-code methodology that Informatica is preaching. We'll do a deep dive into one of those methodologies, which is pattern-based approach, which basically is used to accelerate the development. And finally, we'll look at a customer story where we have used this, to implement their entire end-to-end project. So cloud modernization, we all know companies are embarking on cloud modernization. They have different vision, different strategies, and different appetite, for doing whatever they are attempting to do. So some of the organizations are trying to sort of modernize their data warehouse, whereas some others are sort of trying to build their data lakes, so that they can bring more and more data into the lake and do advanced analytics on it. So data engineering is one of those. Data warehouse, as I just suggested, is another one. So also companies or organizations are trying to bring their applications, modernize their applications, using cloud. I mean, Salesforce is a very good example for that. And increased use of data science, where the data is getting interpreted in multiple ways, in terms of social media and all those different channels that we use on a day-to-day basis. So if you look at it, in all these areas, integration is the common theme. And companies might be using Microsoft Azure or GCP, that is Google Cloud, or AWS, or something that's available like that, even Oracle platform, right? So anywhere, whichever way you look at it, when you want to move data, integration is the common aspect. You need to get your data provisioned so that you can get in and do anything beyond that. And this is all happening in different ways, right? We go to multiple customer sites, we interact with them, and we see that there are multiple ways in which they are trying to modernize their cloud or modernize their IT infrastructure. Some of the organizations are cloud only, cloud first, cloud native. So they have a full-fledged drive to sort of just go to cloud and use cloud, and that too a single cloud. For instance, the vision could be we are going to use Azure or we are going to use AWS, these are the companies who are more interested in going to a single cloud, whereas we come across organizations where banks and major organizations where they look for redundancy, and they might look at multi-cloud where they could have redundancies established by using more than one cloud provider like Amazon and Azure Synapse as displayed here, right? Having said that, most of the places we are visiting, what we come across is hybrid cloud, where they'll have on-premise plus cloud, both embedded together. Because we all know that major organizations still have a lot of on-premise applications. Mainframes are still there, and it's going to be there for a while. We all know that. So hybrid cloud is very popular. Something that we are seeing, like it is declining, or there is definitely a reduction in the way on-premise, organizations are looking at just on-premise applications. So even though that's one more area where cloud platform, Informatica cloud integration platform could be utilized, we can see that that's going less and becoming less and less as we go on. Just wanted to touch base on a general architecture. This is not our core agenda, but still I wanted to touch base on this so that you get an idea on how these different flavors are being, how Informatica cloud can adapt to these different flavors. So what Informatica have done is Informatica have got a secure agent, which is basically the powerful engine which does the data integration for your organization, which means that is the core agent that's going to move your data or access your data. So the architecture supports that particular agent to be 100% within your firewall. Whether it's your VPC or VPN, wherever you want to deploy it, it's going to be 100% within your firewall. And when you look at it, data flows from your left to your right or vice versa, just by using the agent, which is 100% within your firewall. And what stays in Informatica Cloud over here is just your metadata, which means not a single byte of your data is moving or leaving your premises at any point in time. And if you look at it, there are other features, which empowers our cloud platform much more. There is high availability, and there is elastic facility where you can have a serverless engine, and you can sort of spawn more nodes, when you need more computation power and things like that. But since that's not our core agenda, I'll move on. But we need to just understand that the secure agent is always going to be behind your firewall, and the data is not going to leave your enterprise, your premise, your firewall at any point in time. Now, Informatica's cloud platform, we all know that, Informatica is anything, everything data. So once we get into cloud, what we get as a package is the catalog, data catalog, which is basically your lineage and metadata capture, your governance. Then your data integration, whether it is pure data integration, or if you want to sort of integrate, or orchestrate your applications, so you can do API level integration as well using this platform. You can do your data prep, data quality, master data management. You can do your customer 360, which is again a flavor or a domain that is managed, within master data management. Or you can get into your governance and privacy. I mean, all this is going to be available in one single platform, which is your IDMC platform, Intelligent Data Management Cloud Platform. And this is all powered by the AI engine, which facilitates or which empowers the cloud platform to sort of function and reduce the amount of code that is required to be written. There is a lot of machine learning that is embedded, and the architecture is microservices based, API driven. So that's a bit of about what the platform have got, or how it actually helps organizations solve their issues. Now, these are like resource constraints, cost overruns, and complexity. We all come across it on a day-to-day basis, So your return of investment, is always, under trial. Basically, you can't find enough people, resource, to sort of do your work. So when we talk to our customers, they come back and say that, or in fact, 96% of them have come back and told us that they want to reduce the amount of code that is written, which basically helps them to reduce the maintenance aspect as well, and also getting something into production so that it could be exposed to their customers or their users and users. Because of this lack, definitely there is tremendous cost overruns, and organizations are struggling hard to sort of deal with the complexity that, and they vouch that it is more than 72%, at any point in time. How can Informatica help you reduce it? Yes, Informatica can sort of reduce your resource constraints. And from our experience, from what we have published in our ROI guidebook, we can easily say that at least half of your development effort, build effort, or resource constraints can be removed or neutralized. The cost overruns as a result of it have come down by 70%, and the complexity reduced comprehensively by 35% plus. So 35% would be your bottom limit. I've come across projects where the complexity is taken out sort of to a 80% level by introducing the pattern-based approach. Now, how can we basically attack these issues of resource constraint, cost overruns, and all these things? The one and only way is to sort of go with a self-service automation-based approach or configuration-based approach. And why that is important is more than 87% of the organizations are expecting to face talent shortage. And this is real. And we experience that when we need people to join our team. So it's all over the place. Everybody is aware of it. So difficulty in finding specialized skills, that's one of the major attributes. So when you get out to the market to find your resources, the right resource for a particular job or a task, it's hard to find. And imagine if you automate. If you can take out, like what we have found out is 2 resources for every job. Imagine if you can reduce it to 1 or 0.5 full-time equivalent. That means you gain a lot, and you reduce a lot of that overhead and the complexity, as well as the constraints that are faced by the organization when they want to roll out a new feature to the customer. So let's get into our core thing. So this is Informatica. We believe in no-code, low-code methodology. And we work and research a lot to sort of empower our users to sort of get their work done by doing less. What that brings alongside is it helps your data governance and maintenance, in the long run. So if you look at one of the aspects, you have multi-step wizards, for data ingestion and integration. So we've got wizard-driven methodology available for data replication, database ingestion, streaming, or file ingestion. You don't need to write a single set of code. You can just get into the wizard-driven, the wizards that are available and simply configure to achieve whatever you need to achieve to move your data from here to your cloud, data warehouse, or lake. The second option that you have is to build your own templates or use the existing templates, which comes bundled. So there are heaps of templates available. And once you get into these template-driven methodology or the pattern-driven methodology, what you're literally doing is configuration again. So the beauty of Informatica is, or the cloud platform is, you can build your own templates. If you don't find one, that is already there. And you could add it to your enterprise level repertoire, your repository, so that you can basically suggest or create a configuration page or a framework page where you can say, okay, if you need this sort of a requirement, use X mapping or Y mapping or Y task, rather than trying to build the entire thing. And to accelerate the development itself, Informatica have got reusable objects and maplets for dynamic mappings. Dynamic mapping is nothing but where Informatica can intelligently identify the metadata and act accordingly. So for instance, if you are interacting from table A to table B, it can go and read the metadata of table A and adjust the output that it is integrating into table B automatically. So it accelerates the entire process without giving you one bit of pain. How do you do the pattern-based approach? Yeah, it's a simple 5-step process, right? The first step that you may need to do is to analyze what you need to do. So let's assume you are getting into a migration project, right? A data migration project, or let's say a code migration project for that matter. You need to sit and analyze what sort of magnitude is it that you're trying to handle and what all types of integration jobs are required, right? Once you do the analysis, basically you can get into your identification step. This is where you will spend some time to get in depth to identify the actual jobs that you need to write or the patterns that you need to use, correct? For example, let's say you need to identify how many type 1 mappings versus type 2 mappings versus type 3 mappings, how many mass ingestion tasks, or how many source to target, single pipeline mappings that you need. So these are the things you'll identify in step 2. Once you complete your step 2, then you get into your build phase where you're going to build whatever patterns are not already available within your organization. Let's say you already have 10 patterns and a lot of those things could be accommodated into that 10. Then you're not going to build anything. You're only going to build for those where you don't have a set pattern already available within your organization, right? And step 4 is now automating what you built. So that's a simple framework-driven approach. You'll have a simple table or a couple of tables which could basically store the configuration information. For instance, the name of the task that you need to build, or a couple of parameters that you need to substitute while you automatically create a particular task. So this can be achieved by using the REST API based methodology that is available. You have the TA, Cloud Application Integration module available within your cloud platform. You just need to simply use that to automate it with a couple of tables, which is going to be the driver for your configurations. And once you do that, the last simple step is to orchestrate. So what we need to understand here is that we are reducing the complexity of the building, and here what we are trying to bring in is someone who is not a tech savvy person to just sit and configure, so that they could create, or they could basically generate the task, they need to sort of move data from point A to point B. We'll see this in detail. We have a demo which precisely shows or give us a walkthrough from left to right on how we need to approach something like this. And one of the use cases where we have, or one of the customers, we have literally helped in moving. I mean, this is a migration project, where there was more than 1,000 jobs in there, where they were moving data from Exadata fully into Redshift, and they had a data volume of more than 7 terabytes, with 2.5 billion rows, which was getting moved on a daily basis. What they were trying to do was, they were on Exadata and they had a lot of PL SQL. So they wanted to get rid of that, for their integration. And what they wanted to replace with was Informatica platform. And to do that, to achieve it, to achieve or rewrite the entire 1,000+ integration jobs that the organization had from Exadata into Informatica, and then move the entire data and all the integration jobs going forward, took end-to-end 7 months for us. And this was achieved by creating 20 reusable patterns and automating the creation of that 20, the 1,000 tasks, by configuration-driven approach, which is basically the pattern-driven methodology. The result was extravagant, in the sense it is outstanding, because they could get rid of the recurring cost of their Exadata, which is a lot. I mean, in-house warehouse applications are always expensive, and they could now look at expanding or bringing something more into their organization pretty easily, pretty quickly, without more hang-ups, because the platform now lets them connect to any of those cloud-driven, cloud modernization application that they want to sort of embed within their organization. So at this point, the organization have moved their entire Exadata data into Redshift for their warehouse, and they use AWS extensively for their other purposes, and Informatica Cloud is their core integration platform. And this is all in Australia. This is one of the customers I worked on. So it's a major success story for us, and this is just one among the hundreds that we are working on a day-to-day basis. So that's about it. And what we will do is we'll try and get into a brief demo so that we can have an in-depth look into how the pattern-based approach works. So what I have is a simple framework and a simple mapping, which we'll try and replicate, from an end-to-end process, so that we understand the process and we can go from there. Okay, so let's log into Informatica Cloud Platform. What you're seeing over here is all the services that are available to us. If you want to lay your hands on any of these specific surveys, please reach out to your sales account manager or your pre-sales contact. They should be able to organize it for you. So for the demo purpose, what I have done today is I've created a fictitious bank called Clyde Bank. So the Clyde Bank have got a requirement. They require one pattern and they have to reuse that pattern for 3 different tasks. So that's what we're trying to build and automate here. Remember that we're going to follow the 5-step process, the pattern-based development approach that we discussed during our presentation just before, right? So also what we need to note here is that the first 2 steps, the analyze and identify steps, we are assuming it's already done here, right? And we'll start from the build process. Okay, so let me get into the data integration service, and I'll show you what is the pattern that we are planning to build here for Clyde Bank. So within Clyde Bank, we've got these two different assets, right? The first one is a mapping, and the second one is a mapping configuration task. And in the mapping, it's a very simple mapping just for the demonstration purpose today, right? It's a source and a target. There's nothing in between. And basically what I'll explain, or what I'm going to demo, or what I'm trying to explain is that it doesn't matter whether it is 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 or 100 parameters in here. So in this case, we've just kept it simple for explanation purpose, ease of explanation purpose in a way. Yep. So we've got 4 parameters defined here. That's the source connection, source table, the target connection, and the target table, right? So once this mapping is done, the pattern mapping is done, we need to generate a template of the mapping, which is basically the task. So the template that you've created is the mapping configuration task, where we have substituted the connections and the source and target table names, right? So that is pretty much the first part of our build, right? In the second part of the build, what we'll need to look at is how are we going to substitute the parameter values, right? For that, what we'll need to do is a very simple table, right? I mean, why I'm emphasizing on simple is it's very important that we keep the entire process simple. The moment you complicate your framework, what happens is the amount of maintenance that may be required if you want to make some change increase as well proportionately, right? So just need to be wary of that. So in this case, I mean, because it's just 3 or 4 parameters, we've just created the basic table with the mapping configuration task name. Remember, we need 3 different mapping configuration tasks. That's what we are trying to create here automatically. And then we have the source and target table names here, right? So once we set up the framework table, the very next step that we need to get into is the actual process, the automation using the application integration service, wherein we'll be sort of using the values, the substitution values that are required for the pattern to be driving the creation of the number of jobs that we need to create using that pattern. In this case, we have decided we are going to create 3. Okay. So for that for that process, let's get into the same Clyde Bank, and we'll look at the CAI artifacts that we need to build here. So basically for CAI, we require, what would be the first step? The first step would be to sort of read the Oracle framework table so that we can access the substitution values, that is required for the parameter. Okay. So once that is there, what would be the logical next step? The logical next step would be to sort of use that value and then call the APIs, the cloud APIs, to sort of create more mapping configuration tasks, the MCTs, right? So once we create that MCTs, or once we access that APIs, basically what we are doing is using those parameter values or the substituted values to sort of generate your different tasks, right? And the final process, or the final aspect of it, is to actually build the orchestration itself, for automating. So we'll start with the application connection that we created for Oracle here. So it's a simple connection. We are using a JDBC connector to create a connection to the database table that we just showed over here, right? So we are just trying to get connected to the Clyde Bank database, and we want to sort of do a select clause or a query, onto the framework table here. The next immediate step that we need to do is now to find the operations that are available, right? We need to sort of create the service connector with the information on accessing the various operations or actions that are exposed by the REST, using REST API by Informatica Cloud, right? So for that, we'll need to sort of build this. So obviously, we'll need to get the authentication specified. Then we will be sort of identifying the actions that we'll need to sort of use for creating this end-to-end process. So definitely the first and foremost task is to create or call the login process. So what happens with Informatica Cloud is as soon as you authenticate, it provides you with something called as a session ID, which is valid for the duration of your actions, right? So once we accept that, or once we receive that, basically that session ID will be used for the consequent API calls. So in this case, basically we are intending to make 3 different calls. One is the initial login call to fetch the session ID, then creation of mapping task instance by looping through or creation of mapping task by looping through the values that are provided by the framework table. And once we loop through the entire table and create all the eligible tasks, we want to log out gracefully. Okay, what you can see is there are other APIs similarly available which you could use to build similar things, within your cloud. So just to have a look at a couple of this. So what we are providing is basically what type of action you're performing, then the binding, basically the endpoint, the URL that we need to call, to access that REST API operation that is exposed by cloud. And if there are any parameters that we need to pass, that is also specified over here, just like this, it's pretty straightforward. And then basically, if you want to see an output here, you could do that, and you could basically test it straight over here. And the moment you test it, you'll get the request and response. So this is an response in your, XML format. You could even specify in your header if you expect a JSON format, in terms of a response. So here, that's what we have requested. We have requested for a response on the response payload as in the JSON format, right? Similarly, we have built the logout function as well with a binding, and if there is an action input required, yes, we select the the binding, which is basically the endpoint URL again. Please note that always, we need to be careful. The endpoint URL, if it's very specific, you have to be precise with how you're calling it, and if there is something that is mandatory in the header, you need to do it, make the call with that. And the good thing about this is once we do it, it's forever to use, right? It's just once you need to create something like this, then we can pretty much use this service connector for any number of operations or orchestration that you want to create, and you can actually build more and more operations to the same service connector. All right, so the very next process, after this would be to create the application connection. Now we have created a service connector. So similar to what we did for Oracle, now to access the service connector, we need to create an application connection. And that is pretty straightforward. Basically, what we are saying is we need to sort of use that this particular service connector. We need to access this. So we are just saying the authentication methodology and the route to sort of basically get to that application connector. Okay, so this is pretty much your wrapper, your connection info. Just like you have a wrapper for your mapping, when you need to sort of configure, parameterize and configure using an MCT, this is your wrapper, to wrap around the service connector to specify your connection methodology, or how you want to sort of the protocol, setting the protocols and connecting, and utilizing your service connector. So once that is done, the final process that we'll need to do is the actual process of which is your orchestration process. So if you click on that and go inside, this is a simple process, where what we are doing is we have start, and here we are definitely declaring some temporary variables. These are variables which will be holding some of the information. For instance, we have created a record list, so this is precisely accessing the framework table which we created in Oracle, and we are fetching the entire record, right? And here what we are doing is, this is the entire list, and from here what we are doing is basically picking from this list record by record so that we can loop through it, right? And these are the variables which are going to store the name, the source, and the target table names, right? The MCT name, the source and target table names, which is available in a record. So just to repeat, what we are doing is we are creating the first one to create a list, which is in this case going to be 3. And then we'll fetch the first record and substitute the values, substitute the values into these 3 variables so that we can assign it and call the APIs, right? So in the next step, basically we are assigning the query and basically getting the record list, from your Oracle framework table. And the very next assignment statement, what you're doing is from the list, just like what I mentioned, right? In the temporary variables that we have. Once we have the list, we need to sort of access the record by using a function like this, or you could go with any methodology that you want to do, or any function that you may want to use. You could go with a tail or whatever, and then decrease from there. So it depends on how you want to approach it, and then assign the individual temporary values to your variables. Once that is done, now we are ready to sort of call our APIs, to create the mapping configuration task. So by the time we reach here, we have the first record and the values substituted clearly. So if you look at the service, I've created the connection that we created, the wrapper that we created for the service connector, right? And we are providing the input fields, which is going to be used for substituting while calling the API. Once we do this, what happens is we are going to make the call to the endpoint, right? I mean, what I showed in your service connector. So if you look at it, if I go to actions and if I go back and show you the creation instance, there is a binding that we are specifying. And here we have actually, we are trying to read the parameters that is in here and substituting it. So for instance, this is how we are substituting the task name, which we are fetching from the record here. So basically, we'll be using similar ways to sort of assign the source table name and the target table name. Once we assign it, we make the call straight into the endpoint and we get that created. Then we are sort of trying to do the looping. And what will happen is this will loop through all the 3 records in this case. It could be 10 or 100. Okay, so once it gets to the end of the record, it'll exit the loop through the logout exit option, and it'll end the process. So what this means is once you have made this basic setup, so you could have n number of patterns and you could have one of these created for your patterns, and then you just need to do the configuration in the framework and run this orchestration to create your task. That's how easy it is, right? So what I would want to show you is just to sort of run this behind the scenes and demonstrate how we could, how this happens, right? So if I copy this service URL and call that or execute that API, what happens is it is running behind the scenes, and you could see what has happened as well. You could go to the console and see what just happened over there, so this is what just ran through. Yeah, it just ran for a few seconds, and it is sort of 3 seconds or so, and it has created, or it has completed the process. And now if I go back to my CDI and get into the default space, I can see that these 3 mapping configuration tasks are created automatically. So it is ready to run. I didn't touch it. I didn't make it. It could be in hundreds. This could be your enterprise standard. If you run it, it just starts running. You just need to make sure that when you create the configuration, it's done in a proper way. When I say create the configuration, it's like this. Here it is 3 parameters. You could have 100, right? So it doesn't matter. Okay. And if I go to check how that performed, you can see that it is just completed now. And if you go in, you can see the details on, 5 records, it ran for like, not even a second, right? So it just went through in no time, and it has processed all the 5 records. So basically, it's a simple way by following a methodology. That approach is just a 5-step approach, which we have done multiple times. And the good news is that you don't have to create all the mappings. A lot of these mappings are available ready-made over here. So if you go to your templates that are available out of the box, these are all already there. For instance, let's go to warehouse. We all know what is a type 1, type 2, right? If you open something like this, what you can see is it's a very complex mapping. It's a pattern which is parameterized, right? And if you look at the parameter over here, there are quite a few in here. So looking into the number, you may have a framework table or a construct which could handle these many parameters and do a substitution on the fly to get. So let's say you have 20 type 2s that you need, or type 1s that you need to create in this case. You just need to sort of use this to basically create those. There is no more build, so this is where it comes back to your no code or low code philosophy. So this is pretty much configuration with no code. The low code comes in if I have to give you an example, let's say you have a requirement where, let's say you have a first name and a last name, which is in the source, and you want to push it to a target table, and the field name is totally different. There is no way to dynamically identify. You can still do it by position, and there are a few ways to do it if you look into your CDI platform and how to build a mapping, right? But then let's say, it's not in any order where you can really automate, and you still want to sort of parameterize it, and you should be able to sort of map that field. So this is first name concatenated with last name, which is flowing into a target field, which might be called, let's say, individual underscore company name. So it's not at all related, right? And you need to be able to sort of do the field mapping. So those are the cases where it is still configuration, but you may have something like this, a target table, where you go to field mapping, and you'll see that, this is completely parameterized. So here a BA or a data steward or whoever is a bit tech savvy will need to sort of get in and do that source to target field drag and drop, just to sort of make sure that it is done. So this is fully configuration based, and it is very simple. And what could result, once we your advantage once you follow something like this, a routine process or a standard process, is that your governance also becomes easier. You can gauge how your mappings or your builds are going to perform. At the same time, your maintenance, or the time to deploy something new comes down. So the number of resources that you require for your build, is going to drastically reduce, which is going to sort of put those extra dollars back into your kitty for other purposes. So this is pure return on investment, and Informatica, this is what we love here, right? We enable our customers to get things done quicker, faster, in cleaner ways, which is measurable, rather than trying to do bespoke mappings, where end of 20 mappings, you won't know what we have done for the first mapping. And it becomes like, rather than maintaining, somebody needs to really build. Or you'll have a documentation scenario where you'll be sitting and documenting for 2 or 3 months, and then somebody goes back and makes a change to the mapping. 3 years down the line, the document is no more valid because it's not been updated. So once we follow a standard procedure like this or a process like this, the advantage is you have a pattern which need to be documented. Then the rest is just configuration, and that simplifies the entire process. Now that we have completed our demo, we are ready for your questions. Today, in the panel, I've got Abhinav Rai, who's our practice director for ASEAN, and Nagaraj Ganiga, who's our migration consulting manager. Thanks for joining, guys.
Hello everyone, please post your queries in the Q&A box if you have any. Over to you, Deepak.
Thanks, Vrinda. Guys, while you're posting queries, we've got a few questions that have come through already. So one of it is, we've got CDI access already. How can we get the rest of the service access, including CAI? So for that, my first comment would be, or my recommendation would be, for you guys to sort of approach your sales and pre-sales guys. So recently the licensing model have changed considerably, and currently the licensing model have changed to Informatica processing unit-based licensing, which is basically called IPU-based licensing, which means once you get into that licensing model, you pretty much have access to the entire stack that you see in the platform. So that makes things simpler, easier, and quicker for you, and you get to try everything that is a fit for your organization, rather than going nitpicking on separate services. So I would suggest you guys sort of get in touch with the team so that you can get your hands on to the rest of the services as well, not only CDI. Nagaraj, there was a question on the execution types. Would you want to take that, please?
Yep, sure. So the question here is, what are all the execution engines that can be used with Informatica Cloud? So specifically for cloud data integration as a service that we are talking on IICS, we have multiple options. One of them would be the native execution. So when I say native execution, customer would install Secure Agent either within their firewall, or it could be Informatica hosted Secure Agent, where the Secure Agent would actually do the execution of the job. The other option would be use the same native execution, plus if you would like to leverage the push down optimization feature, where the Informatica mapping would get converted into the SQL queries of the corresponding database, and the SQL query gets pushed to the database, and it would typically form a temporary view if required. It creates a view and selects the data into that view, and from that view it inserts the data into the final target table, and all these would be in the form of SQL queries. The other execution option we would have is CDI elastic or serverless. In this case, we would basically spin up the Spark Kubernetes cluster where the jobs would get executed, and this would, since it expands based on the job type or the job load, it is elastic in nature. It can expand and come down to the minimum number of nodes based on the user configuration. So these are the different execution engines that are supported with the CDI.
Yes, I've got another very good question, which is the question goes like this: what all kinds of projects can utilize this approach? So I would say it is not basically limited to any particular type of project. Rather, this should be an enterprise-wide practice, in terms of how you conduct your integration or how you sort of build your integration patterns. So the patterns have to be predictable, or what you integrate have to be predictable, right? It has to be consistent. So when you have a single pattern being repeated, everything around your build, the entire process, the development, the testing, the entire SDLC basically becomes way more efficient. Because what happens is the testing becomes, your product, your artifact, or what you call your asset, basically becomes very efficient because it's tried over and over again. And on top of it, what happens is you don't need to sort of get a lot of developers in the organization, because end of the day you can just try and identify the pattern. When some business unit is approaching you basically for one of these integration jobs. So it's not basically rooted to a particular type of project. Rather, as I said, it should be for any type of project, whether it is migration or your day-to-day data integration, your batch or your streaming, whatever you're doing, it should be, I would suggest, should be a pattern-based approach or parameterized way of doing things, wherein you can endorse your enterprise-wide data integration aspects or patterns, right? I've got one more here, which says, can we build patterns for orchestration similar to how we build patterns for integration? I think it's a good question. I think you're referring to task flows here. And yes, of course, the API layer of Informatica Cloud Platform is very rich, So here what we've used is a single API, which is or single operation that is exposed, using that REST layer API, where we are creating mapping configuration tasks. Correct. So there are heaps. Maybe we are using two more. One is a login and a logout. But there are heaps more in there. You can get your activity log, or you can create your task flows, or you can do whatever we pretty much do. The only thing you cannot maybe directly do via API is building that mapping or designing the mapping, as we say, right? So the rest, pretty much everything that you can do in the entire platform, every functionality, every feature, every asset that you can create or modify, I think you can approach it via APIs. And you also have options to, let's say, you're changing your pointer from, let's say, you're moving your data from Oracle to similar endpoint, different endpoint. Let's say you're picking Teradata or something else. You've got rather than building, you can also do your partial updates on the APIs, on whatever attributes you could do that partial update. You don't need to sort of drop and create the entire thing. You can even sort of go and update just the endpoint connection details, if that is one of the requirements. So if you look into that API guide, it's very rich. This is just one simple tip of the iceberg sort of use case where we were just trying to demonstrate that you don't need to do everything fresh or build everything fresh. Rather, you could sort of approach it from an enterprise-wide perspective, where you're trying to standardize your data integration tasks.
Thank you, Deepak, and all the panelists. Let's wait for some more time. If we do not have any questions, then we'll wind this up. Just wanted to call out that this webinar is being recorded and will be available in the Informatica support YouTube channel and the Success portal. You'll also be able to download the slide deck from the Success portal. Also, please put in your feedbacks and suggestions. We'd like to get to know from you about your suggestions for upcoming topics for Tech Tuesdays, etc. Please feel free to let us know. Over to you, Deepak.
Yeah, if I have any more questions. I'm just looking now. I don't have any more coming in. So maybe I think if you guys have any questions, I think we've got a couple more minutes. We'll just wait for a couple more minutes, or otherwise we'll wind up.
Sure. Looks like we have answered most of the questions that came in. Thank you everyone for joining in. Thank you, Deepak and the entire panelists for the wonderful session. Hope to catch you later on our next Tech Tuesdays. Bye.